loud and
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to mute myself.
Cool. Perfect. Oh. Oh.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see everybody. Can't believe we're already in January 25th.
We are. And it's 5 o'clock, so shall we?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. The South San Francisco's Commission on Racial Equity is called to order today, Monday, the 25th of January, 2021. For those who are joining us and would like to go to the Spanish channel, kindly follow what you are seeing on your screen right now to go to the Spanish translation of this meeting. And we'll proceed to roll call. Commissioner Edith Arias, she called to say she won't be here today. Police Chief Jeff Sapardi.
I just let him in and I'm trying to find him to unmute him, but he might have fallen off again.
Yeah, I saw him.
There he is. Okay, hold on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner
can you,
Balmas.
Here.
Commissioner Faria.
Here.
City Manager Mike Futrell.
I'm here.
Commissioner Ibasan.
Here.
Commissioner, oh, there she is. Commissioner McGovern.
I'm here.
Commissioner Monzon.
I believe he is on.
Is he the one on the phone?
I believe he's on the iPhone. I was just gonna
Yeah,
rename him.
8037.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Commissioner Murray.
Here.
Councilmember Nogales.
Here.
I'm here. Commissioner Powers.
Here.
Commissioner Rivera. Commissioner Vaughn. And the alternate Commissioner Fernandez.
Present.
I'm here as well, Flor.
Yes, I heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you do have a quorum of the commission present.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. We are just in the first month of 2021. However, it seems like too many things have already happened. And at the same time, too many things remain the same. There are still many in our community who are suffering due to job loss, food insecurity, eviction threat, and loss of loved ones. The events continue to be described as unprecedented, and with a new administration, I'm hoping the new day has dawned. On our own commission, we have also transitioned from phase 1 and will now begin our phase 2. There was a lot of learning. My sincere hope is that we begin the second phase. We will continue to learn how to recognize and mitigate unconscious bias, consider multiple pathways to succeed in mitigating racial and social equity, and show respect to all, regardless of their backgrounds. Our success depends on all of us, on how we are involved and connected. I look forward to a really good meeting today. Thank you. Hopefully everybody has done the pre-read and you have looked at the minutes of the previous meeting. It was a while. It was on December 2nd. Does anybody have any comments regarding the minutes?
I unfortunately just remembered or realized that this has not been updated because we don't have the raise hands functionality. So we're going to need people to do that with their actual videos, or say it out loud if your video is off. Sorry about that.
Chair Nicholas, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Any second?
I will second.
It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of the previous meeting be approved. Those who are in favor say aye.
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 Those who disagree say nay. It has moved and it has been approved unanimously. So now I will go to the purpose of today's meeting. This is my slide, sorry. Today's meeting, we will have the, is this, Kim, is this your slides now or is it mine? I can see mine. I don't know what's happening in my screen.
I can take it from here if you'd like.
Yeah, please do. It seems like there's something wrong with my screen.
Okay. Well, thank you for the welcome, Chair Nicholas. Today, I just keep thinking about Amanda Gorman, honestly, and I just keep thinking about her amazing words of wisdom, and just thought I would bring that up as we begin our time together. Specifically, our agenda will be to review the meeting goals and provide an overview of the commission process. And then we'll go into the grounding exercise with commissioners, and in a little bit, I'll review the full agenda. So the goals for today are to briefly look at the accomplishments from phase 1 and provide a reminder of what we'll be doing in phase 2. We have updated draft goals, strategies, and action steps that we developed from the phase 1 approaches. So all of the approaches that were prioritized in December form part of the goals, strategies, and action steps. So we'll take a look at those. And then the main purpose of today is to have the commissioners identify considerations and recommendations for the strategies to ensure a focus on racial and social equity as they get implemented. So today's agenda specifically, we'll have an opportunity to review the process, have a grounding exercise. We wanted to take a brief moment to look at South San Francisco's activities for Black History Month and get any recommended highlights from your perspective. Then we'll also hear about a summary of relevant state laws that have been recently passed. And then we'll take a look at the organized goals, strategies, and action steps. And there's a number of components there, but essentially we'll be looking at them in a larger group, and then we'll have the opportunity to break into smaller groups and get your take on those considerations to ensure racial and social equity. And then we'll hear from the public and then come back as a large group. And finally, we'll look at next steps. So as a reminder, I always like to start just reminding us of where we are and how far we've come. So we've officially finished phase 1. That began in August, and we're in phase 2 with phase 3 ending in July of this year, 2021. So as it shows here, phase 1 is about looking into a range of possibilities. Phase 2 is about narrowing and refining the recommendations. And then phase 3 will be finalizing the action plans and the commission reports. As you will remember, we had a number of topics that we covered in phase 1, critical topics to consider for this commission. And then on November 4th, we took a step back and looked at all the topics and approaches in phase 1. And then in phase 2, and specifically I wanted to highlight some key accomplishments in phase 1. We reviewed 27 approaches to address racial and social equity in South San Francisco. We heard public comment, gathered perspectives from community members in the survey. And then, as you'll recall, we looked at about 6 approaches that were voted on to be investigated at the end of those meetings. And we actually are going to hear an update on the first 2 of these tonight. The other, as you'll remember as well, the commission prioritized 11 approaches to develop and for developing recommendations related to implementation. And we'll show you the lineup and timeline for when we'll be reporting out on those. So phase 2 of the commission began in December. Today is our second of those phase 2 meetings, but it's 8 meeting that we've had altogether. So, and this phase runs through April, and then we get into phase 3. So the roles for phase 2, we just wanted to remind you, this phase again is to focus on recommendations and drafting the implementation plans. The city and consultant team, the main role is to gather information from stakeholders on these preliminary recommendations, specifically on the strategies, and then begin drafting the report and implementation plan for you all to review. And then the commissioners will be asking you at each of these meetings about the recommended strategies and action steps for year 1 implementation, and then identify considerations to focus on racial and social equity. And as a reminder, with the phase 3 of commission's work, this is where we'll be bringing everything together, reviewing and approving the Commission on Racial and Social Equity, the final report, as well as the implementation plan for year 1. So with that, we wanted to show you what we're envisioning as that report. So the draft outline is pretty simple, but we wanted to let you know that we're thinking that it will include an introduction with the background. There was, of course, the mission, objectives, and timeline from the charter will include that. Commissioner Kayla has drafted a vision that we will include and talk about at the end of our meeting, but we're proposing to pull together a work group. So think about that if you'd like to join that work group to review that draft vision statement. So we'll come back to that at the end. But also in the introduction, we want to have the way we've approached this work, an overview of the planning and engagement process. So that's all the introduction, and then of course the recommendations, so the goals, strategies, and outcomes. And then the conclusion will focus on implementation recommendations. So we also wanted to show you where we're headed in terms of implementation. So this table is an example of what we are imagining right now, the implementation plan to include. So at the top there, we would include the goal and the rationale for the goal. We're imagining some of the data points that we've seen along the way in each of our initial phase 1 meetings. For each strategy, we'll have commissioner considerations, so that's what we'll be developing today. And then we'll have outcomes, as you can see on the right, community outcomes. Those are the broader changes that we want to see in South San Francisco, with measures where we'll be tracking data to demonstrate if intended changes are happening. So we want to be considering kind of all of that as we are implementing this plan. And then the implementation actions will be down below with a lead and a timeline. So want to be really clear about how this is a roadmap, and we want to make sure that that's a very clear one. And as a reminder, our group agreements and guiding principles have informed all of our meetings and are relevant for all of our meetings. Group agreements, I think you've seen more recently. The guiding principles, wanted to just remind us again how they inform all of the work, and I think are relevant for today's conversation in particular. So with that, I will invite Myra to join us for the grounding exercise.
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, sorry, I jumped on a little bit late. But I thought that, we're getting into Black History Month and all the amazing work that you guys have been doing. I thought that this question might really get into another level of consciousness. So here's the question. Did you learn in school about contributions, historical contributions by non-whites or any people of color? And if you have one, now let's please exclude sports and entertainment, because that's, it's wonderful, but it gets into a stereotype kind of mood. So if you have an example, we were thinking maybe 30 seconds just to say who and what they did, but did you learn about non-whites' historical contributions when you were coming up in school, any people of color? And I want to leave the floor open for anybody to say, and even if you say no, you didn't, just go ahead and say that as well.
Myra, I'll kick off. Admittedly, not enough. And you had me when you excluded sports, because I was growing up a big Muhammad Ali fan, and Hammer and Hank Aaron. We should have a shout out for someone who had a lot of courage in that time. I know I can recall Gandhi being discussed, as well as Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and George Washington Carver. But since those way back years, I have become aware of the rich history that was denied me. So certainly not a lot. That's all I can say.
Wow. And, Mike makes a good point, because I very often, I was telling him when I've done Black History Month speeches, I take a book of scientific and technological contributions, things like the elevator, the clothes dryer, the steam engine, the traffic light, all those things that were created by non-whites, but we're not taught that in school. But those books exist. And so I think it tells us how that informs somewhat stereotypical thinking.
Myra?
I had my hand raised. I don't know if we're looking at that. Go ahead, Norm.
You can go, Pat, you were before me.
That's okay. Absolutely not enough, but something about Hammering Hank. I saw him, I listened to him on NPR the other day, and one of the things that he said is that he doesn't want to be remembered as the person who broke Babe Ruth's record. He wants to be known as, when he's thought of after he was gone, that he wanted to be known as the person who helped his fellow man, basically said something like that, which
Awesome.
was pretty amazing. But way back, I was in elementary school when Thurgood Marshall was appointed to the Supreme Court. So we learned about him, and that was very cool. And I've since read books about him because of that experience when I was young. So. Norm?
No, like you say, not enough. The part that kind of lingers with me is the fact that having been a history major, or the humanities in college, when you look back at how the credit they're not getting, when you go back starting with the Buffalo Soldiers, you go back with the Tuskegee Airmen, the 442nd, the Japanese there. You look at the atrocity that happened out of Port Chicago when they were loading the ships, and there was an explosion, and there was all black workers out there. So again, you don't hear about these things, and they were out there dying along with all other race, creeds, and colors, and again, they weren't getting the recognition well deserved, and again, one thing I will revert back to sports on is look at because the Negro Leagues, how many men and women, actually men who were excellent ball players, were never given the same chances as their white counterparts. And that's an atrocity in my mind. So just to name a few.
And Myra, the two for me that stick out that I actually remember having somewhat of significant conversations about were Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. And those are the two that kind of stand out to me. I remember a little bit of Rosa Parks and Malcolm X, but I remember growing up where we were taught about, and I think it was the same teacher, about Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King.
But you notice nobody's saying the sciences, and science, medicine, and it exists. It all exists. Charles Drew, invented the blood transfusion process. Black doctor way back when. W.E.B. Du Bois graduated from Harvard in 1865. So, there are things there. They're not in our schools. And I don't want to belabor it and take up too much time because I know we have a big agenda, but I just thought that was something to be aware of.
Myra, just really quick for me, it was the farm worker leaders and civil rights leaders like Cesar Chavez and Philip Veracruz, who made impacts to me in terms of where I learned about them in school. So.
Well, and I just learned about the Incas creating the suspension bridge. So all the bridges that we have now, they're not new.
Yeah, just,
Anybody else?
one more thing to add.
There we go.
Sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. So
I know.
That's okay.
But,
The old-fashioned way works too.
yeah. Yeah, for me, it was also pretty light, but we did learn about Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, but I say about them in the sense that we learned their names and, very surface level, stood for nonviolence, but we didn't really learn their actual political philosophies. How, Martin Luther King Jr. was in support of a lot of socialist ideals, was against the Vietnam War. Rosa Parks was part of the NAACP. That was actually a planned strategy. It wasn't just some random old nice lady that one day decided to do
it. Wasn't.
Right? So we learned them by name, but we didn't really learn who they were.
Thanks so much, everybody who shared and who listened. Thank you very much. And thanks, Kim, for the time and space.
I'm not sure
that beautiful slide. You got Garrett Morgan up there. That's the traffic light guy.
Is my raise hand feature working? I don't think my raise
For
hand.
some of us, it's not. Mine is
Raising your
okay.
hand on your video, I would say, is probably the best way to go. It seems, I'm not sure why, but it seems like some commissioners are able to raise their hands and some aren't, and we're not. Again, sorry that we're not sure why.
Can I just add on to the previous question really quickly?
Of course.
Yes, please.
I know we've been mentioning like constant or rigid or specific examples as to what by POC community members have contributed to history at large. But I think it's also important to recognize what they indirectly contributed to. An example would be the Tuskegee Experiment or the Tuskegee syphilis study, which started in the 1930s. This syphilis was injected as a disease to Black people, and in the 70s they found the cure to syphilis, but they did not administer the cure to Black people. And as a result, this became like a precedent for the medical industry to be more careful with what they do, more ethical with what they practice. And I think that this is also one of the reasons why there are some Black communities that are skeptical of the COVID vaccine. And I think it's important to recognize that it is because of the wrongdoings that was inflicted to Black people that we are setting new standards for today's generation.
That's a good point. Real good point.
Thank you. Anybody else before we?
Oh, yeah, just Sojourner Truth. You know, in the Philippines, we never had a lot of experience with African Americans. But when I came to the when I came to the United States, and my daughter was doing something about Black History Month, and she worked on Sojourner Truth, and that was way before our time. She's an abolitionist and women's rights activist. So that was really amazing. It really stuck in my mind.
Thank you, everybody. It's a great question, Myra. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we also, on that note, wanted to give an update on South San Francisco's activities related to Black History Month and have Leslie Arroyo here.
Hi there. Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, Chair Nicholas and Councilmember Nogales and City Manager Mike Futrell and all the commissioners. This is my first meeting that I'm joining you guys. I actually was on maternity leave and I am now back back to working full time come January. So it's good to join you guys for this meeting. So I appreciate you having me here. I just wanted to share with you some of the things that we are doing for Black History Month, which, as you all know, is in February. And come this Wednesday, the City Council is going to be, our mayor is going to be reading a proclamation recognizing February as Black History Month, and that's something that we have done in several years, but again this year, and I think it takes on a bigger, different meaning this year. And so in talking with the mayor, he really wanted to make sure that the proclamation had some good substantial information that we put in there. So we're excited to read that proclamation come this Wednesday. But another thing that we are doing is that we're going to be flying the Black Lives Matter flag at City Hall. And we are going to be doing that on Monday, February 1st. We're going to have a ceremony, and it's going to be our council members and just a few people. Obviously, it's a difficult time just because we're dealing with COVID and the desire to be safe and also remain socially distanced. But we are going to raise that, and then I will be planning on issuing a press release out that day, notifying our residents that that is happening. We also have an All-City newsletter that is going to have a focus on Black History Month, and it's a combination of a bunch of things with regards to what's going on with the month, but it also has just kind of an update of what's going on in the city. So the whole newsletter per se is not a whole dedicated issue, but it has some good information. It also has a combination of what's going on in the Bay Area and activities that are going on in the Bay Area. One of the other things you're going to see in the city is you're going to see diversity street banners, and those are located along Grand Avenue and Linden Avenue. And that's something that we implemented last year, but you can see a picture of that on your screen there, what those diversity banners look like. Another thing that we're going to be doing this year is we're going to be doing a social media campaign. And in February, we're going to be doing a weekly theme. And every day of the week, we'll have a different social media post on Facebook. But what I did is here, on the PowerPoint, I listed, so the first week in February, we're going to have Black History Milestones. And every day for Monday through Friday, we're going to have a different milestone of what happened, just to kind of give people, and quite honestly, I was writing these posts ahead of time and looking at it, and it was really interesting. And I'm excited to put this information out because I do think it is, the milestones that have been accomplished and just, there's so much to be talked about that it's really hard to narrow it to 4 themes in the month of February. But these are the themes that I kind of came up with. So Black History Milestones for the first week. The second week is major speeches in Black history. And then the third week of February, we're going to focus on great African-American authors. And then the fourth one is Black Americans that you don't know but should. So it's interesting because, you talk about, we've heard about, Martin Luther King, but there's a lot of people behind Martin Luther King. And so we're going to explore that in these Facebook posts. And what I've done is I've created a website page, and it's ssf.net/BHM, so Black History Month. And on there, I've put our proclamation, and then I've also put our themes, and then I've put more resources for those themes. And then
be on the next slide, right? Is that right?
Sorry? I think you're probably right. Maybe not.
Great. There we go.
But good. I'm glad you switched to the next slide, because actually what I wanted to get into is some of the virtual events. And, again, we're talking about a tough time because it is COVID. So it was hard to find a lot of events that were going on. And so I kind of put my feelers out there with San Mateo County to try to find out what was going on. And I talked to other communication directors and asked them what was going on in their cities. And what I was able to gather was just there's things going on virtually. And what I listed here on this slide is, first and foremost, the library. They're going to be doing an adult book club, The Vanishing Half by Bert Bennett. And Bert Bennett is an up-and-coming African-American author. And so it's interesting to kind of learn about these folks. And so I would encourage you folks to be a part of this book club. And then for the teenagers, they are going to be doing a teenage book club. And you can see there on the slide there, the book is stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism and You by Jason Reynolds. And that book club is going to happen on the 19th and on the 26th. And then what I did, and this is also listed in the newsletter, and that also the newsletter is going to be currently right now it's getting finalized in design, it's getting printed, and then it will be in residents' mailboxes probably, I would say, that second week of February for all of our residents in South San Francisco. But I listed other Bay Area virtual events. So there's things going on in San Francisco with the African American Historical and Cultural Society. There's a lot of events on Eventbrite. And that bit.ly link that I created that you can see on your screen kind of lists a lot of these. And again, they're all virtual, but you can sign up for them. They're free events. And then Cinema Lit is going to highlight a couple movies, and two of them being Moonlight and Miss Juneteenth. So those are just some of the things. And again, I have to preface it with it's a tough time because there's, normally I think we'd see a lot more activities going on, but things are changing. And as many of you may have heard today, the regional stay-at-home order was lifted, but San Mateo County is still in that purple tier. So we're still having to abide by some socially distanced rules. But I really encourage you guys to get involved with what we've highlighted here. And then I also would love your feedback. If you have some additional thoughts or things that I can help promote for the city, I'm happy to take your feedback.
Thank you so much, Leslie.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Kayla.
Thanks, Leslie, for sharing this. I think all this stuff is really great. I'm not sure if this is related to this communications and celebrations part of Black History Month, but another thing I would like to see is some action. Like it's one thing to celebrate Black people, it's another thing to put our support behind them, whether that support comes from, a fund for our Black youth for their education or the police, we've been asking for some changes from the police department. All of those things would be really meaningful, I know, for me personally. Everything you shared is awesome and amazing. That's just another area of action that the city can take. That would really show that it's not just raising a flag. It's we're actually doing stuff to support what Black Lives Matter stand for.
Mm-hmm. Nope, that's a wonderful point. I agree with you, Commissioner Kayla.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add anything to highlight? Actions, events, ongoing work? You can always send an email to the email that we have for the commission, or email us to add anything else. Well, thank you so much.
And just thank you.
And
I think just as a note,
yeah.
Oh, I was just going to
quickly.
say,
Yeah, we have to keep moving.
Of course. I'm on that email distribution list, so I will see your comments. So if you do have anything, I will take note of that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for bringing this to the commission.
And this is Valerie. I can add one program, kind of late breaking, so we didn't make it for the PowerPoint, but we've been working with San Bruno Library, and we're happy to say that Kirk Waller is going to be back with us this year, virtually rather than in person. He will share African-American stories, songs, and instrumental music in honor of Black History Month. He's won a bunch of awards. He's been at the library in person over and over for many years. And he has always kindly stayed behind and let all the young patrons try out all his musical instruments. Little hard to do virtually, but I wanted to say that we now have a date, Wednesday, February 10th at 6:30 p.m. We have not sent out the registration yet, but we will. So stay tuned to Leslie's BHM website, and we'll have that out as soon as we can.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot going on. And we also wanted to bring you an overview of the recently passed state laws relevant to this commission and specifically to racial and social equity. Myra, I think you're...
And I'll make it quick because I know you want to get moving. What you'll notice, I think that what I noticed, what struck me with some of these is that there's an emphasis on data when it comes to policing. There's also an elevation of mental health as an issue and a category and to solve for it. There's DEI efforts as well as affordable housing. So in mental health and public health, there's a bill to help for easy access, affordable preventive and behavioral care. You might want to look into that. Educational agencies would be required to review and update policies on student suicide prevention. And then there's a bill calling for, addressing racism as a public health crisis, which South City has done. And then in housing and homelessness, there's a bill that opens the way to create some homelessness solutions. So it's kind of, I guess, Bring California Home Fund for solutions. And then I think I had one more. Yeah. In law enforcement, state-led investigations into police shootings. So that will be, on the books. Also, collecting data on arrests by demographics and demilitarizing police uniforms. In the economic development, publicly held companies, I'm sure you guys heard about this, are really starting to look for at least one member of an underrepresented class or group to serve on the board to offer some diversity at the policy level at some publicly traded companies. And then also to collect data, once again, on race, gender, ethnicity in regards to pay. So I thought those were relational to the work that you guys are doing right now.
Very much so. Thank you so much, Myra. Does anyone have any quick questions about any of those laws or any others that they wanted to highlight? That was a great overview. Okay. Right, and a lot of themes that we've actually talked about at the commission, for sure. Oh, I see Commissioner Hermes. Hello. So you have joined. Okay, I wanted to make sure that you're here. Okay. So for this portion, we wanted to make sure that we reviewed how we took the approaches and turned them into goals, strategies, and actions to advance racial and social equity. And specifically, we'll have some opportunities to break out, like we've mentioned, and identify racial considerations and recommendations to ensure that that these are implemented with racial equity at the center. So let's take a look at how we regroup them. I know we talked about this a number of times and there was some suggestions. As you know, we looked at best and promising practices, evidence-based strategies, and brought them to the commission. We had conversations that were identified through these meetings that were reflective of the data that we had seen in South San Francisco, both through the community planning process with Community Collaboration for Success, and others. And we identified 26 approaches that we all looked at closely, in addition to one additional approach that emerged when we asked you all to respond to the survey. From those, 11 approaches were prioritized in December to bring to kind of the fore as we move into the first year of implementation. All 26 still exist, but what we're doing is focusing on those first 11 for the first year. And so with that, we developed goals. And the goals that we developed are intentionally broad, where the strategies and action steps are focusing on action. And they're very intended to be actionable at that level. The implementation plan, as I mentioned, will include metrics to track progress for each of the strategies to make sure that we understand if they're working or if they need to be modified. And, you know, the idea here is to create a roadmap. So if we go to the goals, we've got these draft goals that are kind of the end goal that we're aiming for with this roadmap, with the strategies and action steps underneath to achieve these goals. We're not going to focus on updating these goals at all today, but we are asking you to take a closer look at these along with the strategies and action steps and get your feedback by our next meeting. So as you'll recall in the pre-read, we included a 3-page overview of the goals, strategies, and action steps and how they kind of fit together. And you'll recognize that all of the approaches that you've looked at and approved are included in that list. Page.
And just for the members of the public, I know we won't be calling on you until public comment, but just wanting to remind folks that the slides and the what we're referring to as the pre-reads that were emailed to commissioners are available from the commission webpage on the city's website.
That's right. And the other thing that we're thinking about as we're developing this implementation plan for the first year is how do we kind of move as broad and deep as possible. And with that, as we were preparing for the report out for today on the first 2 strategies, we realized that by focusing on city staff first and what the city programs can do to advance these strategies is probably the best place to start, knowing that we're going to be looking for opportunities to collaborate beyond the city, not just in the first year, but beyond. So that's sort of the focus for now, to make sure that we're able to really move on these. So this is an example of how we're organizing this. Goal 1, ensure ongoing oversight and accountability to advance racial and social equity. And this strategy 1.1 highlights establishing a dedicated staff position, for example, an equity and inclusion officer that would provide accountability within the city to coordinate and advance the entire equity initiative and then help monitor outcomes. So as you'll recall, that emerged at the end of the information gathering process in phase 1. Through the survey recommendations, and I think some commissioners as well. So goal 1 has 1 strategy. Goal 2, on the other hand, has 5 strategies. So this goal, reduce racial and social inequities in the criminal justice system, including policing. We'll be focusing on strategy 2.1, creating a response team for mental health crises today. And then the other strategies we'll be looking at in February and March. And the final strategy there, we're keeping it within this goal because it's relevant, but just as a indication that the first 4 strategies were those that this commission prioritized for the first year. Does that make sense? Okay. So with goal 3, reduce harm of structural inequities by targeting resources to residents of color. There are also 5 strategies, three of which were you all prioritized for the first year. And strategy 3.1 we'll be looking at more in depth today, with the other couple strategies, 3.2 and 3.3, in February and April. And then the final goal for ensure ongoing oversight and accountability to advance racial and social equity. This goal has 1 strategy, and we'll be looking at that on April 14th. So the aim here was to sort of give you an overview and timeline of when we'll be reporting out on each of these strategies, and then asking for your considerations about how to make sure that the implementation is focused on racial and social equity. So again, just as a reminder for that piece, we'd love to hear from you by February 17th. And so both commissioners and the general public are invited to provide feedback by by sending us an email before this February 17th meeting. Okay. So with that, we're going to dive into the first strategy 2.1, the mental health response team. So that again lives here in strategy 2.1 related to this goal here, and then eventually we'll have indicators of success. I'd like to invite Mike Futrell to take it away.
Thank you. Happy to lead this portion of the discussion. But first, let me give much credit to Sharon Watts, who is our graduate fellow in social and racial equity. Sharon is out this week, and so I am a poor substitute. But she was on the working committee from day one, designing this with other county counterparts, and she did a really terrific job. Listening to this commission and to the voices of the community, we entered into an MOU with the county for a 2-year pilot program to add a full-time professional mental health clinician on staff in South San Francisco that can respond to emergencies which have a mental health component. It is a partnership between the City of South San Francisco, San Mateo County Behavioral Health, and Stanford University. Other cities are part of this partnership as well because it grew. So the 4 largest cities in the county, being Daly City, Redwood City, City of San Mateo, and South San Francisco, are also part of this partnership, and each will have a mental health clinician assigned to the city. The role of Stanford University is to set goals and metrics, collect data, report out on the effectiveness, and really bring an academic, professional approach to how we operate, what data should we be collecting, and understand the effectiveness of it as it goes along. The current model, and the model that all 4 cities will be following, has the mental health clinician responding with law enforcement to calls which have a mental health component. That's not the only thing that we hope this mental health clinician can do when they're at work in our city, because that while we have approximately 360 such calls a year, we're hoping there will also be bandwidth for that mental health clinician to do follow-ups with residents in town who we have worked with in the past or have had police encounters in the past of a mental health nature, to try to proactively reach out to those individuals on an ongoing basis. Oftentimes these calls are because someone has failed to take their medication, or for some reason they're unable to obtain their medication, for example. And by being proactive, perhaps we can address that core issue before things turn south and someone calls 911. And then also an opportunity to collaborate with outreach services, particularly as to our transient population. I think, we already have a homeless outreach team that operates daily. We work with the nonprofit group Life Moves, which does have mental health counselors, but also coordinate with them. And then finally, an opportunity to bring some professional mental health clinician into the police department that can work with our first responders to get better. Next slide, please. This is the timeline. So I want to set expectations that this is going to take some time. The thing that is the slowest is hiring the mental health clinicians. This will be done by the San Mateo County Behavioral Health Unit, and they have these clinicians already on their payroll, but they tell us it will be difficult to get the right people willing to do this work. And then there's the training component, and not just the clinician, but also training at our police department, particularly our 911 dispatchers. This will be a new experience for them to triage a call from the beginning to determine what's the nature of the call, does it have a mental health component, and what's the appropriate response. And the hope is that over time, our dispatchers will be rather skilled at that. And then we can do a better job of surgically providing the right person to respond to the right type of call. But that's going to take some training, not just classroom training, but also just on the job training to get that done correctly. And at the same time, the working group I mentioned that Sharon is a part of will be working on procedure manuals to get this program up and running, and then working with Stanford University to determine the correct metrics. But our goal is to hit the streets in June. The county has already approved the MOU. The City Council of South San Francisco considered and approved it on January 13th. And I believe this week, Daly City and I think the City of San Mateo, if I'm not mistaken, their city councils are considering it as well. We assume that they will likewise enter into the agreement. There are some budget considerations, joint budget effort between the county and each of the cities. I hope that seashore sound is not me. We're going to push through it if you hear that noise in the background. There we go. Next slide, please. So those, go back to the previous slide page. I made this slide because I thought it was easy to kind of understand in big words, you know, big font. Go to the next slide. This is what it will look like in the report, in the official, where all of that stuff you just saw that's kind of easy to understand is put in these implementation actions in a more formal way. So just know it's the same material, but this is kind of the format that we'll be using to track to make sure we're staying true to the strategy that the commission has set forth, and that we can regularly update this slide as the hiring and training and the development of this program continues. Next slide. This is the meat slide. This is the one that really I expect some discussion around, because there's been months of discussion around these very topics. The first is why only one clinician. Know that this clinician will work 40 hours a week. There will be times when we get a mental health call and the clinician is not on duty. In that case, we will continue to respond to that 911 call as we previously had. This is a start. We do fully expect the program to expand once we understand how it operates and we get people trained and move forward. So it's a step. Some would call it a baby step. I think it's a little more than that, but certainly a nod to the community and to this commission that this is absolutely the right way to go. And I will say the police in South San Francisco completely support this program. You know, there was a time when this nation as a whole provided much more robust service to those who are suffering some sort of mental illness or mental crisis. But starting really with the Reagan presidency in the 1980s, year over year, the federal government and then the state governments have cut funding for mental health, closed facilities that were treating mental health. And it got to the point that the only ones left to answer 911 calls were the police. That pendulum needs to go back the other direction. The police fully support that. They do not want to be in this position. They just happen to be the only ones left. Well, we're changing that. Why respond with police and not the clinician by themselves? That is the direction we intend to go, and that is the direction we hope to grow to. And we're very aware and have studied the CAHOOTS program out of Eugene, Oregon. I've seen those statistics, but know that that program has been up and operating for decades. And they have trained 911 dispatchers and understand when a call comes in, they can accurately triage which one has a real danger to it, people with guns, which one is not that, and assign appropriately. We are going to get there. But right now, we'll start with going out together. And the way this will work, a call comes in which has a mental health component. The 911 operator will be trained enough to recognize that and dispatch the mental health clinician. Police and the clinician will go there together. They won't be in the same vehicle. Perhaps the police will get there first, the clinician get there first, and a quick assessment will be made. If there is no danger, the police will back out and the clinician will take over. But we will get better over time at understanding through 911 and just plain experience which ones where the clinician might go out by himself or herself. So we're going to grow to that. We hear those voices and believe that the right way to go is the CAHOOTS model. And we have an opportunity to change during the pilot program as we learn more. And then finally, why is the clinician in the police department? Well, they're technically not. The program, the money for the program, the direction for the program is in my office. And really Sharon and I will be working a lot with that. So we're not expanding the police department budget nor their authority, but from just a practical day-to-day point of view, the mental health clinician will be at the police department. That's where the 911 dispatchers are. And that's where really the focus of that emergency response is. So that's where we are. I've been in government for a very long time. This went pretty fast for a program like this, to put a budget together, to get MOUs together, to get city attorneys and county attorneys to agree to the terms, to get it approved by county supervisors. And I think that speaks to the voice of the community and this commission, and then to the sincerity of those involved that we really want this to work and see this as a better way. So happy to answer any questions. I think that's the last slide, Paige. Okay.
I see a question from Commissioner Vanessa. Go ahead.
Sorry, excuse my baby if you start screaming. So I know that we're only having one clinician. Did we do some review of the statistics for the 350 or so calls that you said we had last year or the previous year to make sure that if there's a trend on the time that those calls are coming in, more day, more night, to make sure that that timeline's being covered?
Really great question. And we spent a lot of time on this. We all assumed it would be 2 in the morning and the weekends. That is not the case. It turns out it is Monday through Friday, kind of noon to 8 p.m., where most of those calls come. So we're going to go with that assumption. But again, we will be updating procedures as we go along. After a couple of months, if we find out it's better to do a Tuesday through Saturday and maybe cover that Saturday, we will. Good question. Thank you.
I have a question. How long's the timeline for the Cahoots model where how long, I guess, is the training slated for until a clinician can go out alone? Do we have any insight into that?
We've had that discussion and I have internally benchmarked 6 months.
Okay.
So 6 months of operation. Stanford will be collecting the data. We'll see how well our 911 dispatchers do at being able to discern calls which clearly don't require a police component and those that do. And I could see some baby steps. Well, I'll say as soon as possible, but let's call it 6 months and see how that goes. Now, yeah, I will say the Cahoots model is really very good, but there are certainly times even there after decades of experience where a clinician goes out by himself or herself, gets on the scene, and then the clinician calls 911 for police backup because what they find when they get there is not what was expected. But it's definitely a better approach and we'll get there.
Thank you so much, Mike. Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Paige, I just wanted to say.
Sorry, I just saw Bobby's hand, and then I'll come back to you, Commissioner Mark.
Very briefly. No, I'm impressed with the speed at which this was rolled out, to be honest with you. I remember when we began this work on the commission, it was made very clear that while we would be making recommendations for longer term projects, that we would still be able to move on them sort of during phase one, during phase two. Clearly you've begun implementing some of these recommendations. So I want to applaud that. I had a question about the academic component of it. I was just curious, number one, has Stanford, the folks that we're working with there, do they have experience evaluating these types of programs? And also, is there a particular academic department or that is kind of helping with this evaluation piece? I'm just curious, when you say Stanford, what part of the institution are we looking at for guidance and help in this program?
Sure, great questions, and I'll confess Sharon would be the better one to answer.
Okay.
Because she's actually worked with them, but I do know it's the Gardner Center at Stanford, and that they have done a lot of great work on social equity and social work in particular. But I will alert Sharon that that's a question we'll bring back to the commission.
Yeah, if we can't answer all the questions, we'll be recording them and getting back to folks. Commissioner Mark, it sounded like you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to echo Commissioner Bobby Vaughn's thoughts about how this was a priority for the commission and how this is a win for the commission and also for our community to show how important this issue is for everyone. And we saw the importance of this and we wanted to move very quickly. And so I just wanted to congratulate and thank this commission for pushing this and supporting this idea. And this is just an example of the work that we're doing, how important it is. So I just wanted to echo those comments.
Great. Yes, thank you all.
Thank you. So the next strategy that we'll be looking into today is strategy 3.1. And one of the action steps is related to community navigators. And I think either
I'm here.
Valerie, go ahead.
Hi. Chair Nicholas and commissioners. I'm Valerie Summer, Library Director. And first I want to say thank you also to Sharon, who really helped us in developing. This is baby steps. We're just rolling out this concept, but she worked with Carla Bourdon and myself in describing the navigators and coming up with a very preliminary plan. So I want to thank her as well. But I'm happy to say that in keeping with the library's history of providing equal and equitable access to resources and information, as well as leading up multiple outreach projects and partnerships within South San Francisco communities. We're taking the lead via the Community Learning Center on the Community Navigators program. We've been active participants in CCCS as well as the Big Lift. And both of these initiatives overlap with our commission's focus on leveling the field by bringing resources and support to residents of color and low-income communities to reduce gaps created by structural inequities. We are starting off planning as a one-year pilot initiative with plans to have quarterly pauses to check in with engaged community as well as the commission to make sure we're on the right path and to identify new or expanding directions as things come up. For instance, if we had started this in early 2020, like we had started some other outreach projects, we would have had to pivot to address the impacts of COVID and COVID responses. We've always been a flexible and nimble organization, especially when it comes to community needs. This will be an asset during this initiative. Navigators will assist our hard-to-reach, low-income, and communities of color, help them access and navigate social and health services, as well as local government, school district, and county-wide resources and information in their preferred language. Next slide. Oh, previous slide. The one with the, there. I know that, I think it was last August that the commission saw several slides on where people lived, what neighborhoods they lived throughout the South San Francisco, and what languages they preferred to speak at home. Well, one of the things that our community navigators are going to address is how complex and confusing all these resources and all these connections and all this information is. And our navigators will be bicultural, bilingual, several languages, Spanish, Tagalog, Mandarin, Cantonese. And our goal is to reduce the language and literacy barriers so we can get those residents, all the residents, the appropriate information and connect them as well on the citywide level. Community capacity building to participate in some of the decisions and the planning that the greater community takes part in for the city. Next slide, thanks. So the Navigator program has several upfront objectives to inform, educate, and empower the community through targeted outreach and education, to increase and improve training and collaboration between the community, between city staff, local organizations, county departments, and as well as I said, bilingual and bicultural outreach approaches to engage our community in civic engagement. I guess in a nutshell, we're going to have our community ambassadors or navigators and engaged volunteers present throughout the community, walking those commercial corridors, tabling at community events as soon as we can do so, such as farmers market and school distribution on lunch sites, etc. Part of our learning curve is the number 2 there, increase and improve training. We really want to strengthen our information and referral services in order to respond appropriately to community requests and needs. And getting to know, once again, the social service agencies, the city departments, and the county services will really help this connecting community to services and information resources. We've heard a very, very large, broad list of needs, from accessing social services to navigating the school district to benefiting from local health and mental services. And part of our planning process would be identifying and pursuing current and perhaps changing needs of community. One of the things we've done over the years for our outreach projects is to seat an advisory board of community members, of perhaps commissioners, to really keep us on track, to review what we're doing, to look past the projects, to make sure that we're looking to the future and we're addressing the emerging needs of the community. And it is also very helpful to measure success. How are we going to measure success? What does the community need? We have also found for sustainability planning, our advocacy group or advisory group is really key to continuing on some of the initiatives that we've done. Next slide. Okay, this is like the this is the mic slide, but this is for the navigating program. We are separating it quarterly updates. The first 3 quarters are here on the slide. Between April and June, we will be identifying, confirming program funding, and also starting to get our navigators and our community volunteers in place. Our second quarter, July through September, we will meet and engage with community agencies for resource training. And for me, it's also making those personal connections. It's really important for us not to meet up with community, not to have a table at concert in the park and just give out phone numbers. We really want to be able to provide soft landing for our community and knowing who to contact and knowing exactly what they'll be able to access in some of our referrals. So that's part of the planning in that July through September schedule. We will also identify and engage bilingual city staff for participation. We have bilingual, bicultural staff across the organization who are experts within their department of what the community needs to know or to receive services. So we'll be working there. We'll start with our outreach strategy for informing our community about the Navigators. And I remember at one of these meetings, I can't remember who, but I was really pleased to hear one of the commissioners mention that picking up flyers in the library were the way to go for her. That yes, some people do social media, some people like the website, but there's sometimes just a flyer in a public building about services is really impactful and important. And we'll start with developing customer service surveys. We do need to evaluate the program, and I really believe in doing this early. And then our third quarter, October to December, we see a soft launch of services going out into the community, the boots on the ground, and continuing to develop our areas of expertise and what we will be working with the community on, and bringing it back to the commission as touching bases and also working with the advisory group that we have already established. So those are the first 9 months. And of course, there's another 3 months, but I think it's a work in progress and we will depend on community to let us know where we're going. So next slide. So I thought I maybe did a little back padding because the library has done a lot of successful outreach grants and projects over the years using bicultural, bilingual city staff and a lot of community volunteers. Some of them have been out of the Learning Center, some of them have been all city or all library. I don't know if any of you participated in the Lifeline transportation project. This was a project out of the CLC. It was funded by the MTA, and it was a way to get information on public transit out to the greater community. We had quite a lot of interactive workshops in the Community Learning Center Computer Lab and mapping out how to get places. But I think better yet was we went on field trips. We had up to 400 people participated in the field trips and the classes, and we had a lot of families on our field trips because we went to Pier 39. We took the free shuttle over to BART, over to Muni Metro, walked back to BART and home. We did a lot of local museums up and down the peninsula. We took the ferry from South San Francisco. So it was a very, very successful project. And hopefully we empowered the many, many people who took these classes and these field trips, empowered them to take public transit and be comfortable in mapping out their path. We also did, we still do job connecting at the Community Learning Center, connecting community members with resume building, interviewing techniques, looking for jobs. We pivoted a little more during COVID, and we added some of these essential documents that people needed to submit, such as unemployment forms. And again, we're still helping people look for jobs in the Learning Center Computer Lab. Of late, I thought I put a couple of the last 2 outreach projects, the ones we're also very proud of. The Census 2020 outreach, we had navigators, census navigators speaking multiple languages, fanning out into the community, going to the food distribution sites, doing some pop-up programming, as well as a census caravan. And we were so successful, we reached a 79.9% response rate for the census. I know if the census had gone another week or 2, we would have hit that magic 80% number, but it was a successful program. And I'm sure we'll have a couple of the same navigators working this new program. And Hermes knows about the Equity Lanes project because he and some Hook River people also had an outreach grant to get the word out to community members, particularly low-income members, community members of color, on the impacts and mitigation of the coming 101 toll lanes. You know, how will it affect them? What are some things that the County Transit Authority can do to help mitigate the impacts on that? We also did, of course, voter outreach. We had our largest vote center turnout this year. 3,000 people voted at the main library. This was after quite a lot of community outreach and voting navigators into the community. So I'm finding that this navigators and the prospect of, again, reaching out broadly throughout the community, very, very exciting. And I'm looking forward to get it off the ground. So thank you for letting me speak. And if you have any questions now or in the breakout session, I'll be around. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valerie. These have been so comprehensive, these presentations. I'm also very impressed. I want to just make sure Maria, the translator interpreter, has a minute to ask any follow-up questions. We so appreciate simultaneous translation is tough. So I don't know if just take a breath, make sure, yeah, if you have any questions, that we really appreciate your time with us.
Hey, Maria.
Okay, so let's open it up for any quick question before we break into small groups. Any follow-up questions for Mike or Valerie?
Sorry, I had one question.
Yeah.
For Valerie. Just in the implementation actions, I just wonder if we can form a baseline for the usage of services today, and then like that's another way to evaluate if the outreach is working, in addition to the like customer surveys satisfaction.
Great comment. Maybe we can talk a little bit about more in the breakout session. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. And
hello.
Commissioner Hermes, we're having a hard time hearing you, but if you text me, I can let the commission know if you have a question or comment. Does that work? We couldn't hear you very well. So while I'm waiting for Commissioner Hermes to get back to us, I did want to just draw your attention to, Paige, back to the slide that you were on. We have some drafted community outcomes and measures here, just so you have a sense of some ideas that we're thinking about. So those, like you were saying, Commissioner Kayla, we can add there some more information in the small groups, and are looking forward to having some time to talk about, the ways that we might want to track progress. Okay, so any other, I'm just checking to see if we have any other comments or questions before we go into small groups. All right. And I think Hermes is texting me, but I will, maybe we'll go into the small groups together, and then we can come back and we'll have an opportunity to say more. So with that, again, the small groups are going to be focusing on identifying considerations to ensure racial and social equity as these strategies are implemented.
And as in previous meetings, so the commissioners will be able to be the only ones who are able to speak, along with facilitators. The public can listen, and then we'll do a report out so that everyone can hear at least the takeaway points or the main points that other groups shared. Then we'll do public comment, and then we'll have a large group discussion.
So Paige and Kim, I don't know if I have the right documents for the breakout session.
That's a good question. So Lisa should be able to screen share. But I'd also resent you.
Yeah, I forwarded it to you just now.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Everyone will be moved into breakout rooms, and then I'll let the facilitators know when we're a few minutes away. It's only gonna be 15 minutes, so be prepared for it being short.
All right, so Paige, you're gonna flip to the slide. Hi, everybody. So what we want to do first is to focus on the strategy 2.1. We will be, mostly asking, we wanted to know what considerations and recommendations you have about this strategy to ensure that we're focusing on racial and social equity in the implementation. And so we have about 8 minutes for this this strategy, and then we have another about 8 minutes for strategy 3.1. And so just thought I'd open up the conversation to the group. Let's see who's with us for the commissioners. The commissioners include
Jessica, Gladys,
Commissioner
Kayla,
Cheska,
Mark.
Kayla, Mark, and Gladys. All right. Welcome, commissioners and community members. Community members, as Paige mentioned, you'll have a chance to add your thoughts afterwards. So let's hear from the commissioners. Anyone want to start with a consideration to make sure that this strategy will focus on racial and social equity in the implementation? And if you just want to indicate with your hand, I think that could work. Yeah, Commissioner Cheska.
I know that we mentioned that we already have a team, the Stanford one, but I don't know much about that just yet. And I think Commissioner Bobby Vaughn just asked which specific department are we working with, or who are they? And Sharon has the knowledge about that. But beyond that, I just feel like the response team for mental health crisis, substance use, and homelessness, I think we should look into hiring people of color, because it does make a difference because we're talking about de-escalation and conflict management. To see someone who look like you, or at least who physically appear to be someone that looks like will understand you, not like beyond the idea of language or what you speak. If English is not your first language or whatever, it feels safer, and it does make a difference. Because this was during the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement protest. I was at BART. I was just on the way back to South City because I live at Berkeley right now. I'm going to Cal right now. I was sitting in BART, and beside me across my seat was just a lady who looked so afraid, and I did not care to ask if something was wrong. This is based on my experience and why I'm recommending this strategy. She said that she specifically sat next to me because before she could even finish explaining, the police barged on from the other end of the BART train, and she just looked really scared. And as the police was approaching, she said, "Are you gonna do anything to me? Are you gonna do anything to me?" And then they said, "No, ma'am, we're just gonna ask, why are you sweating?" And then she went back to her defensive state and said, "If you are here to tell me that I should pay for my BART ticket, just know that I paid. I did not BART hop." And then they left. "No, we were just gonna ask if you're okay because you seem sweating and you're nervous." And so they left. I think, and then I just said that, I was just there looking. I did not have the instinct to do what I feel like I should have done, which is explain to these officers that she is completely fine. The lady just probably walked miles to get to the train, but they left her. They went to the different train, and then she thanked me because she said, one, I am a woman. Second, I'm a woman of color. And she just felt safe that I was there. And I think it makes a difference when you see someone who look like you. I personally feel safer when when my professors are people of color, especially in my social science classes. So I think it really does make a difference.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that experience and your experience is very relevant to making sure that, so we've included here the third consideration is to prioritize hiring people of color. So thank you for that. Yeah, Commissioner Kayla.
Another thing I was thinking is if I mean, it applies to Stanford, the dispatchers, the police, and the clinician. If they understand how different mental health issues are, I'm not an expert here, but like how the symptoms or how they're showing are influenced by a person's identity, and how it might be different by race or socioeconomic status or whatever, and just have a more nuanced understanding of conditions, so that they're not always like applying the same tactics. They probably already do this, like this is probably an obvious thing, but just to make sure that they know that. And also, like, the medical research that is out there is biased. I just saw the American Psychiatric Association like published a pretty good statement on racism in their own research. So just like making sure they're really doing their due diligence on where they're getting their evidence from, their tactics from, and how that might differ across populations.
Again, really good points. So just wanting to give Paige a minute here to get it all down. Right, so.
All right, thank you.
We just want to make sure to capture all that you both so far have mentioned. So making, working, it sounds like both of you are thinking about the Gardner Center and really want to understand more about their approach to evaluating this work. And I think we've got both of your comments there. Okay, great. And Jessica, yeah.
Oh, I forgot to add that I think hiring people locally would also contribute a lot, just because we don't want to be hiring people all the way who live in Silicon Valley when the culture is very much not the same from here at South City. I do think that we have enough talent or people with qualification who live here at South City and who are living or who are working all the way at San Francisco. And yeah, it's just different when you have someone who understands the culture of South City rather than someone who works all the way at Silicon Valley or East Palo Alto coming all the way here for these jobs. And this does two things. One, it makes the people feel safe and more understood because they understand the culture. And secondly, we are providing opportunities for our local community members.
I was going to actually also mention that. So I totally agree with Jessica's idea of hiring someone local, at least someone from San Mateo County, because, depending on who applies, but having someone with that local perspective, at least from San Mateo County, helps with kind of the situation and understanding the neighborhoods. It's really, really important. It's kind of a buy-in into the program, right? That you have someone that understands kind of the situation an individual might be going through because they lived in the neighborhood, right? And that I think that's really, really important.
Great points, thank you. So it sounds like there's a lot of alignment around your comments so far. Paige, how are we doing on time? Should we switch to the next strategy or any other?
Yes.
Yeah, probably. Okay.
And
So
then
thank
maybe
you.
one more thought.
We'll have time to come back to this. Any other last thoughts before we move to the next strategy?
Just on accountability. Like, these are just really complicated situations. I don't even know what the right answer is to this, but there should be a step 6 on if something does go wrong, like what is the steps that are triggered for accountability, whether it's for the clinician or the police officer.
Kayla, that was actually mentioned in the MOU in our discussion in the city council. They talked about individual steps in terms of if there were conflicts between the clinician and the police officer, how they would try to resolve that. But yeah, those need to be explained to the community so that, again, this is an idea that we are backing, that, we really need buy-in. That's the word I've been using a lot lately from the community, that this is going to work. And so I think more accountability, more transparency of how this program works, I think it's going to be really, really key.
Thank you very much. Yeah, these are pretty complex strategies, so there's a lot behind each part of it seems. Okay, so let's take a look at strategy 3.1. So we'll keep all of these, and maybe maybe I could just identify, I don't know, Commissioner Cheska and Kayla, since you had a lot to say, to maybe report out for the small group when we do that to the large group. So strategy 3.1. So this is under goal 3, target resources and support to residents of color to reduce gaps created by structural inequities. And this specific strategy, expand linkage and navigation support for priority populations and build trust between community members and the city of San Francisco. So we heard a pretty also, going back one slide page.
Sorry.
So we heard a pretty extensive plan, and it looks like there's a couple folks maybe from the community that have their hand raised. I think
No,
that
it's
actually might be
Hermes.
Hermes. Is that Hermes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
he just rejoined, so I just renamed him.
Great.
And we've
Commissioner
had a few
Hermes.
people, it looks like, drop off and come back in. So just FYI, we have Hermes, Chair Floor, Cheska, Gladys, Kayla,
Yep.
Mark,
Yep.
and this.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Commissioner Hermes. Did you want to add
Wow.
a consideration? Glad you're with us.
Thank you. I'm in the dark right now, no electricity. I've been listening all the presentation, and I just want to add that I'm glad that I think all these programs is exciting. I would like to help in any capacity that I can. And I know I'm coming to the end of this group session, but all what it was said was it is really encouraging. Thank you.
Great. And now other commissioners, if you wanted to add any other considerations or recommendations to make sure that the implementation of the Community Navigator program focuses on racial and social equity. Oh, thank you, Paige. You're adding a comment from before, yeah.
Paige, would you mind putting me back to Nayeli's group, because I got disconnected, and when I came back, I got into this group. Sorry.
Yeah. You're welcome to stay if you'd like. Other considerations for this strategy?
I was from Nayeli's group as well. This is Vanessa, but I'd also like to say that we should be considerate of documentation and asking for identification as a source, so that we're not marginalizing people who don't necessarily have documentation that they want to provide.
So if I understood what you were saying, Vanessa, removing the requirement for documentation for these, for access to programs, is that right?
Yeah, or maybe not an initial ask right away, but as to make sure that everybody can receive services when they're having interactions with our program.
That's great. We definitely heard that concern raised earlier on, so appreciate that you're bringing it up here. Commissioner Hermes, you have your hand raised again.
Yeah, so I think I'm just coming in and out. So we're talking about a program for financial help, right? Is that correct?
This is the Community Navigator program. So it's making sure that people know about different programs and supports, and then get linked to those programs and supports.
Yeah, but is that also about how to help financially to some of the people that has rental problems, or not?
It not necessarily. It's more
Okay.
health and well-being. Yeah.
That
Okay,
one
okay.
we will be discussing, I believe, in April. That's on,
Okay.
it's on the list of
Well,
things, yeah.
I just heard was removing the documentation, and that's what I somehow I connected with that. I would like to suggest one thing. This is all great what we're working on it, but I would like to suggest is that we also suggest a place, or I know COVID right now is not allowing us, but at least to put it on the paperwork, where are we planning to do that? For example, in Old Town, downtown, do we have any specific target areas where we're going to do this outreach besides the flyers that, on the main commercial avenues? Which location? Because it gotta be according to the location, right? We cannot do something on the Furniture building for different areas.
So sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, with taking notes, I lost track of time. So all the breakout rooms are now back in with us. And we'll move to report out. Apologies.
We're so engrossed in our conversation. Hi, everybody. You just wanted to join us, it looks like. All right. So let's hear what the small groups had to say. We can add as we go. Let's talk about making sure that implementation of these strategies are focused on racial and social equity. So Nayeli or Myra, Nayeli, you want to go first? Just give us a brief overview.
Be happy to. So in my group, I had Chair Nicholas, Commissioner Futrell, and Commissioner Murray. So great group of great conversations. So we had on the response team considerations. What came up was, really ensuring that there's respect for the person, regardless of their demographic profile and perceived status, and looking at really hoping for a reduction in the total number of 911 calls as a result of this effort and others in the county, so that this particular strategy can really address mental health as a root cause and work proactively to reduce calls. So it can even impact the budget if there were fewer calls for service. As well as another consideration is the clinician training and de-escalation and anti-bias training. So that should remain a focus. So again, as far as kind of outcomes metrics, the decrease in 911 calls, change in culture that the community can see, because by having a mental health clinician, it sends a message to the community that it's a health crisis that's being addressed. So that's what we had for the response team for strategy 2.1. For
maybe I'll just actually let me just pause there. Let's just do that strategy first.
Let's do that one. Okay.
Come back. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Great. So Myra, did you or somebody in your group want to give an update on what you talked about?
I can start it off, and then Lisa, you want to join with? Maybe we kind of tag team it together. One thing that I failed to do was to write down role of the commissioners. We had Commissioner Bobby Vaughn, Commissioner Norm Andrea, Commissioner Azzopardi, and forgive me, commissioners who were there, and I didn't write it down. We jumped right into the conversation, and one early point that was made is with the strategies, when it comes to the mental health officers or anybody going out into the community as a pilot program even, are those trained staff going to be reflective of the community? Will there be diversity with the communities that they serve? Will that link happen with those particular services? And I thought that was a great point. Commissioner Bobby Vaughn brought that up, and then Commissioner Norm said that, the data is going to be important, because the data's there for the different communities. Let's use it in the implementation phase. The chief reminded us that there are a lot more calls than 360. Those were the ones that go to 5150. But he says they can actually use the help right now. As recently as last weekend, it would have been helpful to have someone. So he said that even in the pilot phase, they're going to be very busy. There's enough of a need out there. Lisa, what am I leaving out?
Sure. So the second item was just to understand the type of calls to make sure the correct person is responding. You have the correct language being used and respectful of race.
Thank you. So I was wondering, Commissioner Kayla or Cheska, if you wanted to give a brief report out for our group.
I can go.
We had in our group was Commissioner Cheska, Vanessa, Kayla, Hermes, and Gladys, I believe.
Can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just mentioned two things, and that is to ensure that the people we put in these positions, the people that we hire are by POCs or identify as by POCs, because it does make a difference when our response team look like us, and it fosters a sense of safety. Also, the second one is ensuring that the people we hire for these positions, again, their role is to de-escalate and to mediate situations. Again, it's not going to feel safe if we are putting a Black person in front of a white person. I personally don't think that that's always like the best thing to go. I mean, it depends on the person, but it really does make a difference. And by ensuring that the person we hire is identifies by POC and an SSF resident who has a knowledge of how the culture here at South City is, it's going to make a difference. And yeah, just making sure that we are providing opportunities for our local community members as well. I think, yeah, I think that's
Mark or Kayla, you were part of the group. Anything to add there?
Go ahead, Kayla. No?
Okay, yeah, we all agree with Cheska. Like some other groups said, training for the folks at Stanford, dispatchers, the clinicians, everyone should be culturally relevant, and where they are getting their research from, where they're getting their best practices from, to really scrutinize that type of data as well, to consider race and socioeconomic status. And then at the end, we started talking about accountability and just making sure in advance of launching this program, we know, what accountability structures there should be, what are the steps that are going to be taken in the case that something does go wrong. We acknowledge that these are really complex and difficult situations, so just want to be prepared in advance for the right response if something were to go wrong.
No,
Thank you
I
so
think
much.
in our group, we all agree what everyone's saying is that I think the word that I was using was buy-in from the community, is having someone from the community, or at least understands our community, if they're from San Mateo County per se, just so that they understand that the issues are happening in South San Francisco. It's really, really important to have that person in this role. So, but I think for the most part, everyone agrees with what everyone is saying.
I think we also mentioned how it's not going to be logical to have someone all the way from Silicon Valley representing a position that does not really resonate with a community member. So it's just good to give this opportunity to a person of color here, residing here in South San Francisco or in the San Mateo County.
Yeah, it was a good conversation. Paige, is there anything else that we wanted to add? Should we go to 3.1? All right, so back to you, Nayeli. What did your group have to say about expanding linkage and the Community Navigator program?
Right, on the Community Navigator program, we talked about the importance of partnering with the school district as a way to reach potentially a lot of families and children. There are also a number of Title I schools, and so that it could be pretty comprehensive in the outreach efforts. Another commissioner mentioned that they seconded the district recommendation and they were really excited about this strategy, as there were communities that felt disconnected and unheard, and they were really hopeful that this strategy would be a way to connect with those communities in a culturally, linguistically appropriate way. And also another consideration is to really help the community understand the safety net and address barriers in language, and as well as in the culture of fear that the previous administration had cultivated across different communities. And so some of the metrics that we discussed, potential metrics, is track, as someone had mentioned in the large group previously, track whether folks are more engaged with services, track whether they're using programs more. And so some of this they pinned would be more qualitative than quantitative, but it's a promising strategy to bridge, the service gap. And then the very last point we talked about is to use different places where we know that people have needs, such as places of worship and other faith-based partners.
Covered a lot of territory.
We did.
All right, Myra's group, let's hear from you.
Yeah, like I said, I'll start it off and then the commissioners and Lisa can come in and, fill it in. But there were some really strong and good solid points that came up. One was, we talk about the navigators building trust. Maybe it's important to find navigators who already have those connections and those relationships of trust within the community already, if it's possible. Because if we're looking at these as ambassadors and conduits for other communications and that, it's better if they are actually a part of the community, so that was a really good call out to me. A reminder that the digital divide is very real and it challenges being able to implement certain types of programming. And so there needs to be a consideration of that within any implementation strategy. Also, and there was a mention that during the census, iPads were used to physically go to people with iPads, and that was one way. And so, maybe there's some tactics that are similar to that could be very useful. And let's see, evaluation. And I know, the partnership will provide this, but a reminder that evaluation and assessment is crucial in order to course correct or to, do more of something the right way or whatever. So I'm going to, go ahead and yield my time to the floor to those who were in my group to fill in the blanks. Anyone want to add something? Well, don't everybody talk up at once. Lisa, do you want to add some things from our?
I think what I heard, and it almost made me feel like we're establishing a concierge program. So to ensure that the follow-up, to make sure the information is being received, the resources are accessed. So assist kind of all the way through, right? If you do a referral to an agency, follow up with that agency to make sure the services are being accessed by the individuals. So kind of taking it one step further as well.
That's true. Any of the commissioners who were in the group want to add anything?
Valerie is very insightful on what steps she follows and protocols to evaluate success of how outreach is done. I thought it was very informational, very good.
That's true.
I think it was already brought up by Nayeli a while ago from their group that we should have the response team also collaborate with the schools. However, I think that there should be a specific individual working with the school district, because we might see like, because we only have a few schools in the district, that it's not that big of an issue. But last year, over 40 students came forward with their concerns about sexual abuse from their fellow students. And there, in the previous school board meeting, there were students who raised concerns about the presence of SLOs in school. And I have a friend who got called on by the CP, whose parents were called on by the CPS just because they are failing, when in fact it was an emotional issue rather than something that is related to drugs. And so it brought like a big strain on his immigration status, and we don't want that to happen. And it is frustrating that we have to reach out to county level in order to mediate these problems, when we should have something that is specifically catered to our school districts.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to
Sharon.
interrupt here, everybody, but I just got a call that Floor is having trouble getting on. And so I wonder if IT can enable, she's on. Okay, very good.
Great, thank you. And so our small group, again, with Commissioner Mark and Kayla and Hermes and Cheska and Vanessa and Gladys, we started this conversation. Does anyone want to briefly summarize what we talked about? I think Vanessa added the point of making sure to increase access, to ask not to require documentation. And so that was one of the key issues that we've raised in other conversations, but certainly relevant for this strategy. So considering that as a way to reduce barriers. That was, I think, any other comments, Commissioner Mark? Kayla?
No, I think you summed it up.
We were talking mostly about the other strategy, I guess.
You're right.
All right. Well, thank you. That was a lot of really great information and considerations that we will add to our implementation tables. But now let's take a little bit of time. We have about 10 or so minutes for public comment, maybe a little bit more, maybe 15. And so we wanted to ask the community members for their thoughts on considerations and recommendations to ensure that the strategies that we were just focusing on focus on racial and social equity. So I'll open the floor. And if you could go ahead and raise your hand, then we'll try to call on you. It looks like Alicia Santamaria. Go ahead.
She's muted.
Asking her to unmute now, giving her permission to. Rather.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Hi, welcome.
Hi, so Kim, do you recognize me?
Oh my gosh.
So hi, I'm Alicia Santamaria, and I am a resident in South San Francisco, and I live in the Brentwood community. And I know a lot of people on this call from various reasons. I taught at NDNU, Professor Vaughn, and I know Mary Alexi, and I Ponderosa parents, and you name it. There's lots of lovely connections. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to each one of you for the incredible, I am so impressed. I am so thrilled. I'm so excited. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. And I feel so proud of South San Francisco for forming this commission, for the commitment and dedication and the resources that are being put into it. I want to just add one thing, which is, and I'm so sorry because I can't remember who said it at the very beginning of the call, but just a reaffirmation that it's so important that this goes beyond the celebrations, right? And that, and it's really hard work, but really to make systemic change, you know, we have to go beyond just the celebration. So again, I'm so sorry, I can't remember who said that, but just wanted to reaffirm that. And thank you all so much for all of your hard work.
Thank you, Alicia. We have to connect. Appreciate your jumping in.
Sorry, just a reminder, if anyone called in by phone, you can dial *9. And again, anyone who would like to speak from the public, please raise your hands. Or
hands?
if we're not seeing anybody. I had seen some members of the public raise hands before and put them down, so not sure if anyone's still interested.
Well, if you think of something, we will open the floor back up, but perhaps then we will go back to commissioners' comments. And this is really just an opportunity to step back and think about both of these strategies and highlight any particular considerations or recommendations, or bring forward anything that we've heard and talked about. I appreciate, you know, the breadth of the comments that were made in all of these small groups, thinking really carefully about each of these strategies and how to make sure that they are implemented in thoughtful ways. Commissioner Pat.
I don't have anything to add. I just want to thank the city and Sharon and everybody who look into putting together these comprehensive reports. They were pretty amazing, and I know they took a lot of work. So I just want to thank everybody for the work that they've done.
Commissioner Floor. We can't hear you.
I know there's a concern about the clinician who will be hiring for the 2.1 strategy. During the presentation at the City Council meeting, we had made sure that we are requesting for someone who speaks, who's bilingual and who speaks the language of the residents in South San Francisco, or like you said, who looks like us. However, there is no guarantee because the clinicians are hard to come by, and so we will try as much as possible. We have given our input. Hopefully, we will be able to get the one that will have that suits best for South San Francisco.
Thank you.
And we do have one person for public comment. If anyone else wants to raise their hand, just FYI. If you want to pause for that at the moment.
I don't see any other commissioner comments, so let's go ahead and take, I think it was Amanda, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, Amanda, you should be able to unmute now. There you go.
Hi, yes. Just, as a member of the public listening in, I just wanted to kind of commend everybody for being so open and honest, and also to really commend the city for providing this safe space to be able to be so open and honest. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing for us to have a place where everybody can feel comfortable raising all of their concerns and having them addressed. And I think that while it is important also to have somebody who, I guess, essentially, and I mean this not just linguistically, but speaks the language of South San Francisco, it's also important to remember that we do have so many people throughout the city who are able to translate, and that we really do have a broad range of people in the city who speak multiple languages, not just to target the Latino or Latinx community. But, so I just wanted to thank you all for your work here.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate your comments. Looks like AS is raising your hand. Page.
Yep. Sorry, hold on. Trying to navigate back to me, unmute them. And okay, you should be able to unmute now.
Oh, yes, this is Olga Perez.
Hi, Olga.
Hi. Thank you so very much. I was really impressed with this, with all the work that this commission has been doing. And I attended the school district meeting, and I was so happy to hear that one of the suggestions. So thank you, Pat Murray, for following up with that. But I had suggested, working collaboratively with the city, and I know, speaking to a couple of council members, I know they're very supportive. For example, like the community center, and to be used, for example, a resource or informational center for outreach and dissemination of information. I think it would be such a huge asset for the community and very beneficial as well as appreciated. So thank you very, very much for all your hard work. I really appreciate it. On behalf of the Old Town community, of course. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in, Olga. Anybody else? Any other last thoughts about how to make sure that these strategies are considering the focus on racial and social equity as we begin to implement them? I think we got a lot of really good information and ideas, so I think we covered a lot of territory. All right.
Hi, this is Vanessa. I just wanted to say one thing is maybe access to free interpretive services while people are trying to get services in case languages aren't spoken by the person who they're actually interacting with. If that can be set up ahead of time so people know who they can call to get an interpreter in the right language, or have one of those sheets that says which language do you speak, and they point, and that way you know who to call and what language to get. And then also I think an open communication with comments, public comments, so that it can constantly be evolving. Because I mean, I think the best suggestions we're going to get are from community members who are using these services and getting appointed to the areas of assistance that they need, and so better managing by being able to consistently have public comment.
And just to follow up on that, Vanessa, kind of being sure to get information from public in an ongoing way. Is that what you mean? Just to get feedback?
Yeah. As long as I'm thinking like one place where we can get that feedback and actually make change from it, or be able to try and evolve from it. So not only do they tell the person who they're interacting with, but maybe they can call in or email if there's an email that's open to, I don't know, just to continue after this commission's over and when public comment sections are over, that like we could still gather that good feedback.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Great. All right. I think we are, if I don't see any other hands, perhaps ready for our next steps. So just want to give Commissioner Kayla Powers a shout out for jumping in and drafting a possible vision for the commission. The vision that she drafted, that you drafted, Kayla, is here. And what we thought we would do is invite folks to create a work group, because I think it might be helpful to have a conversation about the vision, and bring back this version or any other changes that you might have to include as part of the commission. Yeah.
I just want to say, like, we could totally like change this. I don't know. I just had sent it to Sharon. So like, I will not be offended if it's like, if people are like, no, let's change these wordings or whatever. Just thought I'd like caveat that.
I think this is really wonderful that, you know, this is really something that we can work on. So I really love this.
It's well done.
Absolutely. So let's see those hands of folks who would like to join a little work group.
Let's put everybody to work.
Needs. All right. So I see Pat's hand. Who else would like to join the vision? Oh, good. Kayla?
Well, I can't raise my hand, but this is Gladys. I can.
Oh, wonderful. Gladys, so glad you could join. I know you're busy. Anybody else? Am I missing anyone that's raising their hand that I don't see? All right. So we have a work group, we have a draft vision. We can follow up with you after the meeting and support you in that. All right, so I think we are now at our next steps. February 17th, we'll be covering strategy 1.1, strategy 2.2, strategy 3.3. And I think maybe it's worth saying that, you know, not every strategy will have as much movement forward. I think there's a lot of work that's being done. And at the same time, you know, we know that there might be a strategy that it's at a different phase or stage. So looking forward to getting an update on those strategies. And then you see on March 17th, which strategies will be up, as well as April 21st. And we will be gathering all of your input and considerations as part of the implementation planning, and we'll be filling out those tables that you saw earlier so that the roadmap is as clear as possible for implementation. So any comments or closing thoughts before we say goodbye for now?
It looks like it's taking shape, so it's really wonderful. It's really nice to see this.
a lot of hard work. I have to say, this commission has been very busy. Well, thank you for the folks who presented today. Really appreciate all that went into that, and everyone behind the scenes, and Maria, the interpreter, Nayeli and Paige and Myra and Mike and Valerie. Thank you so much. All right.
So if hearing no objections, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Good night.
It's hard to leave.